Starting us off in at number 10, Galactus, the Butcher of Worlds. The immensity of Galactus is already scary to some readers as is, but this famous Marvel antagonist has been depicted over the years in alternate universes to have some of the most terrifying aesthetics and dispositions outside his already overwhelming original persona. Galactus, the Butcher of Worlds is one of those alternate identities from a future timeline. From Earth 14412, appearing as part of the Marvel Now line in Thor God of Thunder issue 19, this Black Galactus has Thor to thank for his transformation. As the story goes, a millennia into the future, after the Earth has died out, Galactus returns to consume the planet. But Thor, now King Thor, is still kicking around and protecting Midgard. He gets nostalgic about Earth and fights Galactus, preventing him from consuming the planet. In the process, Thor uses the all-black Necro Sword, which was previously used by Gore the God Butcher, and Galactus retreats, eating Mars instead. Except now the Necro Sword has manifested itself inside of him, which drastically changes him into this. And at number 8, Bullseye. Bullseye first debuted in 1976 in Daredevil issue 131, and ever since he's proven how lethal of an assassin he can be. While his presence would have any superhero on guard in general, there's a version of him from the future that is arguably even more scary than the Bullseye that we're familiar with in the regular Marvel 616 continuity. This Bullseye is an older version who appeared in Old Man Hawkeye. He's clearly been through the ringer, now boasting cybernetic components on his body, with one bit of tech replacing his left eye and another replacing his right hand. Now in this timeline he works for Red Skull and has been aching to kill a superhero. As he notes, it's been 41 years, 7 months and 26 days since he's killed his last. Not like he's counting or anything. Moving on to number 7, Immortus. Putting Immortus on this list is kind of cheating. He's actually a future version of another villain on this list who comes from the future and is a time traveler, aka Kang the Conqueror. Immortus first appeared in Avengers issue 10, 2 issues after his past self Kang debuted in that series. He came to be when Kang grew weary of time travel, and was frustrated at the loss of his son Marcus. Marcus is a dick, FYI. That's for another list though. He's approached by the extraterrestrial Timekeepers, a group of time-traveling aliens who are from the end of the universe and are the last living creatures in existence. They ask him to work for them, preserving timelines rather than conquering them, and in exchange he'll be given immortality. Kang reinvents himself as Immortus and rules over the other dimensional realm of Limbo. Now it's worth noting that Immortus and Kang come from diverging timelines, so they are technically not the same guy, although technically they are. Alternate versions, woo!
Number 7, Doctor Doom. Weirdly enough, in a way, Doctor Doom is also a villain from the future, as he does like to travel back to the past to enact some villainous plots. He traveled back in time to study with Morgan Le Fay, and he's also gone back in time as well with Iron Man to the period of Arthurian legend. One of his most iconic plots in my mind as well was when he wanted to use the Fantastic Four to help him steal Blackbeard's treasure by traveling back in time and recovering it, which seems like a really easy way to possibly mess up the timeline for a reward that somehow, I don't know, it doesn't really seem worth all that trouble. I know it's a chest of treasure, Doom, historical pirate treasure no less, but is it really worth possibly changing the future for? And messing with time? I don't know. Number 6, Monarch. Monarch is another villain from the future who actually, it turns out, was originally a hero. I love these reveals, especially when you are the hero finding out that you become the villain. Gasp. Monarch is actually Hank Hall, who ends up becoming a villain in a dystopian future after his partner Dove dies. For those who don't know, Hank Hall is the hero Hawk of the superhero duo Hawk and Dove. Hank wouldn't be the only hero to become known as the future villain Monarch. In fact, it seems likely much of the villainy behind Monarch comes from the suit that Hank and later Captain Atom wear while donning that mantle. In fact, in the case of Captain Atom, it seems the suit is very much to blame here. Suit making people evil and crazy. Number 5, Nimrod. Nimrod has become even more intense in the last few years, managing to make the overall silly sounding name of Nimrod strike fear into the hearts of mutants and X-Men fans everywhere. Nimrod, despite actually often being associated with the idea of someone being inept here in North America, is actually a word in a literary sense that can mean a skillful hunter, which actually makes it, I think, a very fitting name for Nimrod. But yeah, I didn't know that even until I was writing this, and then I was like, oh. Does sound silly though, ya Nimrod. Skillful Hunter is definitely what Nimrod themselves has become associated with in terms of all the crazy stuff they've done. The Nimrod of Days of Future Past, Earth 811, is a type of Sentinel that originally traveled back in time to fulfill its mission of destroying the X-Men. In a past future viewed in Powers of X, we also learned that Nimrod has the potential to be the end of mutant kind and humankind as we know it. Humans basically become tools to be used by Nimrod to destroy mutants, and mutants are all all but extinct in this future. Number 4. Extant. The thing about time-traveling characters is that you can have a few different versions of them, whether that be in one single timeline or across multiple timelines. In the case of Extant though, we are fortunately keeping things pretty linear thus far on this list. Extant is actually the name that Hank Hall took up after his Monarch persona, and if you thought Monarch was bad, Hank Hall's Extant is arguably worse. Extant is Monarch, but now not only advanced, but with the ability to time travel. He teams up with Hal Jordan's Parallax, and the two villains plan to take control of time itself so that they might manipulate it as they so desire, altering reality itself.
Anyway, in at 4, Master Mold. Master Mold first hit the scene in the X-Men issue 15 in 1965. His primary purpose was to be a portable sentinel creating factory, with robotic sentinels being the ones who hunted down the mutants instead of him. He is without a doubt a scary creation, and is way more than a glorified factory, having superhuman strength, speed, reflexes, and durability. He can dish out concussive blasts, plasma discharges, and he can fly and scan mutants. He can also self-repair, speak, and has been equipped with powerful weapons to defend itself. Now, in the Second Coming storyline, Master Mold from the Days of Future Past timeline sends NIMROD sentinels into the present day via a temporal portal, and these sentinels are rather beastly. Being the most superior force in that timeline, the robots Master Mold created have devastating effects, and the X-Force find themselves traveling into the future in order to stop it. Up next, number 2, Electro 2099. This version of Electro from Earth TRN 590 is absolutely terrifying. He operates in the year of 2099 AD, and was an android construction worker. When his bosses were displeased with his work, they decided to give him over to torture experimenters. Now, during these experiments, his obedience chips were burnt out, which made him into a sentient robot. And then a generator gave him the power to conduct electricity, turning him into a supervillain that would then go on to join up with the Sinister Six in that timeline. He is capable of electrokinesis, energy absorption, can inflict hyperacusis, which makes everyday noises much louder and painful, and he can fly. And while those are rather deadly tricks to have up one's sleeve, it's really his aesthetic that lands this android villain towards the top of our list. And finally, in at number 1, Time Trapper. Time Trapper straight up looks like the Grim Reaper. This villain, hailing from DC Comics, first appeared in Wonder Woman issue 101 in 1958 as Time Master. Get it? Time Master. See what you guys did there, DC. His name would be later redefined in Adventure Comics 317 in 1964. So, what does this fellow do? He has vast control over time itself, specifically over future time, and can freeze it, alter it, separate parts of it to create his own pocket dimensions, yet he cannot alter present time events. Now, originally a robed warlord from the very distant future, he commanded a large number of slaves and placed Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor into a diabolical funhouse that consisted of various disasters throughout history. Over the years, he has had some contradictory origin stories come out of the woodwork, but overall he remains a mysterious and deadly character who is often depicted as a fascist and primarily an enemy of the Legion of Superheroes.
Kicking off the list at number 10, we have ABRA KADABRA. AKA Citizen ABRA, he began his magical days as a Flash villain, first appearing in comics in The Flash issue 128. He's from the future, of course, like most of these guys are, but it's a future where, sadly, magic shows aren't a thing anymore. Yeah, sorry David Blaine, gotta get a new job. He's from the 64th century, and technology has become so advanced that pulling a rabbit out of a hat just simply won't cut it anymore. I heard about the time machine powered by M-metal. He just had to get his glittery magician hands on it. It was only capable of one trip, so Abra snuck into the laboratory and shot back in time to the 20th century, where magicians were still celebrities, like Chris Angel or David Blaine or David Copperfield or, you know, the other ones. He would use technology from his timeline well beyond what we're capable of and then blow our minds in these magic shows. The shows were going well at first until people got bored, then they were actually more interested in this new statue being built in town, so he figured the next logical way of getting attention was to start stealing things, starting with this fancy new statue. He kept stealing, and he kept stealing after that, and he kept using his future tech to evade capture, so when it comes to magicians, Abracadabra is very committed to the craft, in the future or the past. Number 9. Gore, the God Butcher. The God Butcher will be played by Christian Bale in the upcoming Thor Love and Thunder sequel, and yes, he is a time-traveling menace as well. He made his first appearance in Thor God of Thunder issue 2. He was born on a planet with no name, which is always a great sign. Gore lost his parents when he was very young, and he was told to pray to these gods, because they would always make things better, these glorious gods. And then after getting a wife and son, death kept looming over, and he lost both of them as well. Really tragic stuff. So now he's a little bit more than upset at these gods. He wants them to answer or to pay, one of the two. With the all-black Necrosword powers, he heads out for revenge on these gods, but in the past. He would use the Pool of Forever to travel back in time and make these attacks happen. He would use the Pool of Forever to go back in time and then attack all these gods when they were babies, right? So it took different versions of Thor from different timelines just to put a stop to Gorr the God Butcher. So with this new Thor movie coming out, including Natalie Portman, Mjolnir, Lady Sif, I feel like it's going to be a cosmic headache and do some time stuff in there as well. But in Taika, we trust. It's kind of like when Rhodey suggested getting rid of Thanos when he was younger by, you know, Gorr the God Butcher is basically that mentality, but 10 times worse. And with powers. Number 8, Timothy Drake. The Red Robin, aka Tim Drake, first entered comics in Batman 436. He was a young boy who saw the Flying Graysons show live in person. He even received kind words from Dick Grayson, and Dick dedicated that act to Tim that night. How lovely. Now, of course, this was moments before Dick's parents, John and Mary, tragically died during this act. A night Tim would never forget, especially when he witnessed the Caped Crusader himself, Batman, consoling Dick Grayson afterwards. So years later, when Tim was 9, it was Batman and Robin taking down the Penguin, and Robin did this quadruple somersault, the only flip that could be performed by a Grayson, and then he connected the dots. He's like, oh, so you're him and you're him. Got it. Tim followed them around for a while, and then after Jason's death, Tim suited up himself as the third Robin. But in the Titans Tomorrow storyline, we see the Teen Titans travel to the 31st century to assist the Legion of Superheroes, and when they return, they accidentally end up 10 years in their future. So they meet older, darker future versions of themselves, including Timothy Drake, now going by Savior. This version of Tim is ruthless. He even carries around with him Joe Chill's gun to help get the job done. So when the team gets back to their real timeline, they swear to never become their dark counterparts, and they split up. But, like I said earlier, this split up is actually what ends up causing the dark versions of themselves to happen in the first place. Time! You can't mess with time. That's it. The Titans Tomorrow storyline is definitely one you need to check out. We love dark, evil versions of our heroes. We can't get enough of them.
And at number 6, Monarch. Moving on to a DC character, let's talk about Monarch. Debuting in 1991, Monarch was an oppressive tyrant from the future, hailing from the year 2030 AD. So his story goes as this: a different fellow, a scientist who is also from the year 2030, is an expert in temporal studies, and he believes that if he travels back to 1991, the moment in time that a certain DC character turned evil and began transitioning towards becoming Monarch, he could prevent the tyrant from ever coming into fruition. Now, Monarch has a bit of a confusing history. In DC's Armageddon 2001 crossover, initially Monarch's identity was supposed to be a future version of Captain Atom. But then that didn't happen, and mid-story Monarch's identity was changed after there was a leak about Captain Atom being the character. Instead, his identity was changed to Hawk, aka Hank Hall of Hawk and Dove. But later on down the line, in the Countdown Limited series, that identity was somewhat retconned, returning it to Captain Atom, mainly because of the negative feedback about him being Hawk. And the whereabouts of the Hawk version is currently unknown. The Captain Atom version is considered to be one of the most powerful DC villains in history.
Number 6, Reverse Flash. Eobard Thawne made his debut in Flash issue 139, titled The Black Flash. He was the OG Reverse Flash. He was born in 2451 when his parents genetically engineered him, because that's the thing you do in the future, and you can engineer your kids to look and be funny and cute, I guess. Okay, cool. But he lacked the social skills in this time to make his parents truly proud, so they decided, you know what, another son may be the key. A new best friend, great idea, you know, they can pair up and talk and be friends and stuff. Okay, cool. I grew up with siblings, I get it. That second son's name was Robert. He spent so much time trying to keep an eye on Robert and to make his parents proud and to like babysit him, that down the road his application to study the Speed Force at the Flash Museum was rejected. He was too busy, couldn't even study. So he studied it illegally. But he was caught by his brother, who was now an officer in the Science Police. This guy's interesting and a little confusing. So a future version of Eobard traveled through time and prevented his brother from being born, and then he was able to study and was in turn this time around admitted to the Flash Museum. Great. But then when Professor Drake was on the verge of proving the existence of the Speed Force, Eobard has trained his whole life for this, so he wanted to collab, but Drake said no. He wanted to do it solo. So he traveled back in time again and eliminated Professor Drake from the equation. So next time around, there's no Drake, there's no problem. Now Eobard is the professor at the Flash Museum and was nicknamed Professor Zoom. Reverse Flash is responsible for the death of Barry Allen's mother and his wife Iris West. He just rips timelines and the Flash's life to pieces. That's his whole thing. Number 3, Bishop. Lucas Bishop is a time traveler from a dystopian future, and his goal is to travel back in time to stop this unknown factor amongst the X-Men. Okay, so he comes from this dark future and he goes back in time to change it because something bad happens. There's some bad mutant, okay? But this happens where most of the mutant population is depowered by the Scarlet Witch, and then this one child, Hope Summers, was born, the first mutant born since M-Day. Well, it turns out that this kid is the reason Bishop is going back in time in the first place. This kid would end up taking millions of lives in the 6-second war. So Bishop thinks the only way to save his future is to travel back in time and take out Hope Summers as a child, but he fails at taking out Hope, but he does take down Cable, creating this new future where Cable is remembered as a hero for protecting the child, and Bishop was actually remembered as the villain. So he was the villain in his own story, and he didn't even know it. Number 2, Chronos. If you do the crime, you're doing the time. But if you have enough time, you can plan said crime out in detail, and then maybe you just won't get caught next time. David Clinton first entered DC Comics with the Atom issue 3. He's mainly a villain for Ray Palmer, aka the Atom. Now, he was a criminal his entire life, and finally, when he was arrested, he was thrown in the slammer, where he had time to think about everything that he's done, all the reasons why he got caught, why his plans didn't work. But maybe he had a bit too much time. He reflected on his past crimes and what he would have done differently if he had planned it better, and then he used his skills and obsessions with timepieces to work non-stop in the prison workshop, where he learned about clocks, time, the mechanisms within. He learned about everything. So when his sentence was finally up, he was released and then became a time-traveling villain. He used all these time-inspired weapons, like an exploding hourglass, a wristwatch with blades instead of hands, and a device that could slow time down. Going by the new name Chronos, in the DC animated universe, Chronos used these devices to go back in time and steal rare relics from the past. At one point, he actually tried stealing a utility belt from the Justice League's watchtower, but when he was interrupted, he made a break for it through the time vortex, and Green Lantern, Batman, and Wonder Woman followed him back. Not this time, Chronos. Literally, not this time. Maybe the next one.
Number 10, Savior. Savior is a future version of Tim Drake who becomes Batman. Doesn't sound so villainous, right? Well, this future Bat version of Timothy Drake takes things a little too far, which is what makes him more villainous than heroic, despite taking up his own version of the cape and the cowl. Drake in the Titans Tomorrow reality is known by the vigilante codename of Savior, and has gone to extremes to do what he believes is right, meaning that Drake doesn't hold back and kills villains or even heroes who get in his way, eliminating them permanently. Drake and the world were seemingly transformed by a crisis event. In addition, Batman was also killed by Batwoman, which heavily shaped the life of Tim Drake in this reality, who would then do what he swore he would never do and continue on the Batman legacy in Bruce's place. Number 9, King Thanos. King Thanos is an alternate version of Thanos who hails from a pretty terrible future where he has successfully destroyed almost all life in the universe in an attempt to win the favor of Lady Death. In this universe, Frank Castle also becomes Ghost Rider after being killed and then making a deal to become Ghost Rider, returning to Earth in an attempt to avenge the fallen heroes of Earth, only to return too late, with Earth pretty much being decimated by Thanos already. As Ghost Rider, Castle lost his mind from loneliness, but would later have no other choice left but to become the Herald of King Thanos. King Thanos actually has a few people left to kill and needs help, so he actually sends Cosmic Ghost Rider, aka Frank Castle, back in time for a younger version of himself to basically help him in his final battle. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more time travel future-based lists, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Chronos. Chronos is a somewhat confusing character in DC continuity because there are multiple versions of him, and this confusion isn't entirely the fault of alternate futures or time travel either. It's actually more to do with the trajectory of the DC main continuity. Chronos, not to be confused with Chronos, no H, back in the New Earth continuity was known to be a clock-obsessed villain of Ray Palmer's Captain Atom. However, his clock obsession would soon develop into an obsession to perfect the means of time travel, and this obsession would translate to his Prime Earth continuity counterpart, who was an agent of Argus specializing in, you guessed it, time travel. There is also another version of Chronos, which is an entirely different person, Walker Gabriel, who found Clinton's tech and then more used it to become an anti-hero instead of like a full-blown villain.
Number 7, Ultron. The Avengers Age of Ultron storyline is a lot better than the MCU's version of that. The comic Age of Ultron has better time travel stuff than the movie Endgame does, honestly. I mean, Wolverine goes back in time, he tries to kill Hank Pym so that Ultron's never created, but while he's there, he has to talk to other Avengers who are also back in time on a different mission. It's wild, it's a great time. It starts off with New York City in ruins. Spider-Man is zipping around the city, all these heroes are missing or they're dead, and the only way for the city to survive this apocalypse is by offering superheroes to Ultron, who just rules everything. So She-Hulk and Luke Cage are amongst these survivors, and they have the plans basically to just go in willingly, and then once they're inside, they're gonna break everything apart because they're super strong. But then when they get there, it's not even Ultron that's running the show, it's actually Vision. The Vision is being used as a conduit from future Ultron, so he's safe, you can't just go and punch him and then everything's fine. He's in the future, he's safe, he knows what's gonna happen. We're kind of screwed. We can't punch our way out of this. We have Ultron already on top. Ultron is actually barely in the story, funny enough, but the stakes start off raised, so you feel anxious the entire time reading it. It's a great time travel story. Definitely check it out.
Number 3. Immortus. Immortus is one of the most powerful enemies of the Avengers, who was actually revealed to simply be an alternate path that the villain Kang the Conqueror could have chosen. Because there is so much time travel in Kang's past, there are a lot of alternate reality versions and versions from future and past timelines floating around that sometimes even come into conflict with each other, in addition to also fighting heroes along the way. Immortus is one such alternate Kang self. Lord Immortus is what Kang would become while choosing to ally himself with the Timekeepers. He is virtually immortal, using advanced technology to dramatically slow the appearance of aging, and often spends his time traveling through it, fixing various issues with the timelines and maintaining them, which of course grants him a lot of power. Eventually, Immortus would be killed, but even after his supposed death, his corpse still played a key role in a few different plots. So even when Immortus was dead, he was still doing stuff, apparently. Number 2. Professor Zoom. Professor Zoom is Eobard Thawne, the main villain of Barry Allen's The Flash, who traveled back in time just to mess with the Flash's life. That's how much he hates him. He has also been known as Reverse Flash before in the comics. Eobard Thawne hails from the future of the 25th century in DC Comics. Being a very fast speedster powered by the negative speed force, there is much that Eobard can do and accomplish as a villain. Aside from traveling back in time and to other dimensions, he can use his super speed to not only be super fast, but also be super powerful in battle, as his speed also inherently gives him super strength. He also possesses the ability to heal and the ability to manipulate molecules, allowing him to phase through things. Despite being a villain in the New Earth continuity, Thawne even used his molecular manipulation powers at one point to save the DC universe, which I think makes you pretty powerful in my mind. Number 1. Kang the Conqueror. While Kang might look a little silly in the comics with his, his purple helmet and his floating time chair, he is not someone who should be underestimated. Kang hails from the 30th century, where he is believed to either be the descendant of Dr. Doom, Victor Von Doom, or Mr. Fantastic, aka Reed Richards. He is known as Nathaniel Richards in his original future reality of Earth 6311, where he hails from. In fact, a young Nathaniel Richards would go on to become Iron Lad while running from his future self Kang, only to learn that he actually needed to become Kang, or would actually kind of risk the destruction of time and the multiverse itself. That is maybe the most powerful element of Kang. He's like a Marvel absolute, and even though young Nathaniel wanted to become a hero and in essence defeat Kang, he had to accept his destiny or risk destroying multiple universes that have been shaped by a version of Kang and his actions. Kang is basically like integral. If you don't have Kang, everything dies, but if you have Kang in the reality, he's probably gonna try to mess with you. It's like, there's no good answer to Kang.